My name is Lauren. I'm 30 years old, and I never imagined the deepest betrayal of my life would come with a laughing emoji from my own parents. What if the people who raised you suddenly treated your hard-earned savings like a vacation scratch card? That's exactly what happened to me. It was a regular Tuesday morning at my tech startup in Riverton. I was pouring coffee for a client, talking through a new feature, when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced down and saw a message from my parents' group chat. "We're vacationing in Miami with your sister's family. We emptied the joint account, haha." For a second, the room went silent. My smile didn't move, but my heart slammed against my ribs. The joint account wasn't fun money. It was years of my saved salary, late-night coding sessions, skipped vacations, and every extra dollar I'd promised for the down payment on the family home. I forced my fingers not to shake as I typed back, "Good luck." The client never noticed a thing. Outwardly, I was the same calm founder, walking them through the app demo. Inside, something snapped. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate hit. They thought they were clever, jetting off to Miami, mocking me from a beach chair while they burned through the accounts I had funded. What they didn't know was that for months I had been quietly tracking every shady withdrawal, every unexplained charge, every smug little hint that they saw me as an endless ATM. I wasn't the naive daughter they thought they could steamroll anymore. I had a plan. And when the time was right, their Miami dream was going to run into a wall they never saw coming. The girl who used to apologize for making things difficult was gone. In her place was someone who finally understood that love without respect is just manipulation in nicer packaging. This isn't just my story, though. If your own parents drained your savings and laughed about it, what would you do? Be honest. Your answer says everything about where your boundaries really are. 3 months earlier, the first cracks had started to show, small enough to ignore if you really wanted to trust the people who raised you. My startup in Riverton was finally gaining momentum. New clients, positive cash flow, long nights that actually felt worth it. But something didn't make sense. The joint account, the one meant strictly for my parents' mortgage, was draining faster than it should have. At 30, I'd already poured tens of thousands into it, money earned from skipped vacations, declined dinners, and nights spent debugging code at 2 a.m. I told myself it was temporary. Family helps family, right? My father started calling more often. Not to ask how I was. Not about the business. Just money. "We're a little tight this month," he'd say, his tone sharp, impatient. "Send a bit more." It wasn't a request. It felt like a reminder, like I owed him for existing. One evening, I was reconciling accounts at my kitchen table, laptop open, cold takeout pushed aside. That's when I saw it. A charge for $5,000. Labeled travel agency. I froze. The mortgage wasn't due for weeks. I hadn't approved any travel. My pulse thudded in my ears as I clicked deeper hotel reservations in Miami, first-class flights, a luxury car rental. My stomach twisted when I traced the charges to a card linked to my mother. She hadn't mentioned any trip. Neither had my sister. I checked the balance again. Lower. Every week. Bleeding out quietly. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I started saving screenshots every transaction, every withdrawal, time-stamped and backed up. Then a cousin messaged me late one night. "Hey, just a heads up. I overheard your mom bragging about a big family vacation." My chest tightened. I reopened an old family group chat I hadn't spoken in for months. There it was. Message after message, my mother planning the Miami trip with my sister, laughing about beaches and shopping. Then a line that made my hands go cold. "Don't worry," my sister had written. "She won't notice till it's gone." That was the moment trust died. I saved everything. Screenshots, chats, dates, proof. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was clear, calm, focused. They thought I was invisible. They thought I was stupid. They were wrong. And from that moment on, I stopped being the family safety net and started becoming their worst financial nightmare. The next morning, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't send a single emotional message. I did something far more dangerous. I got organized. Before heading into the office, I opened a new bank account at a completely different institution. No shared access, no family names, just me. By noon, every dollar of my startup's profits had been quietly redirected there. For the first time in months, I felt air return to my lungs. That afternoon, I called a lawyer I'd met at a tech networking event, sharp, barely in her 40s, the kind of woman who listened more than she spoke. When she answered, I didn't soften the story. "My parents are draining our joint account for personal trips," I said. "I need to protect what's mine." She didn't gasp. She didn't hesitate. "Start documenting everything," she said, "and stop funding the account immediately." Over coffee in my office, I laid it all out. Screenshots, bank statements, group chat messages. She flipped through them slowly, her pen tapping once before she looked up. "This is solid," she said, "and it's misuse of funds." Something shifted in my chest. Not relief, control. Back home that night, I dug deeper. Another charge had posted while we were talking, a deposit for a beachfront condo in Miami. I cross-checked the date with the chat log and found my mother's message. "This will be the trip of a lifetime, just us and your family." I wasn't included. Never even mentioned. I printed the screenshots. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Every night after that, I backed up my evidence to a secure drive. I labeled files, organized timelines. The chaos they created became structure, my structure. This wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. 2 days later, my father called again. "We need another $2,000 for the house," he said, casual, entitled. "I'll check my funds," I replied evenly. I hung up and forwarded his request to my lawyer. Within hours, she drafted a formal letter demanding transparency on the account and warning against further unauthorized withdrawals. I sent it certified. No return address. They'd receive it and realize too late that I was no longer playing my assigned role. This wasn't about money anymore. Not really. It was about respect, or the complete absence of it. They thought silence meant compliance. They mistook loyalty for weakness. I wasn't angry. I was focused. And when people underestimate you, focus becomes power. The challenge came the very next morning. My phone lit up with a message from my mother. "Lauren, you're too busy with your little app to understand real finances. Leave the account to us." I stared at the screen, my coffee cooling beside me. The condescension wasn't new, but this time, it sounded like an invitation. I didn't reply. Instead, I logged into the bank's website and pulled up the credit card tied to the joint account, the one used for their Miami bookings. Flight deposits, hotels, car rentals. With a steady hand, I clicked Report Card as compromised. Then I canceled it. No drama, no warning, just a clean cut. I was already back in my office when my phone rang again. Dad.
"What did you do?"
His voice was sharp, panicked. We're at the airport. None of our payments are going through. I could almost picture him pacing between check-in counters, sweat gathering at his temples. For years, his certainty had come from believing I'd always step in, donate, fix it, smooth things over. I said nothing. By noon, the messages started piling up. Missed calls, voicemails, a text from my sister accusing me of destroying a family moment. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. They're using the account for personal travel, I told her. Can we move? We're moving, she replied. I'll file for an emergency freeze today. At 3:00, my sister called again. Her voice was loud, sharp, unfiltered. How dare you ruin our vacation, she demanded. That was family money. Family money for a family home, I replied evenly. Not your beach photos. She scoffed, accused me of jealousy, of being selfish. I didn't argue. I'd already emailed the bank requesting a block on all further withdrawals. By early evening, the branch manager confirmed it. The freeze would take effect immediately. They were officially cut off. Later, a friend texted. Word had traveled fast. My father had tried booking a hotel on his personal card, declined. Too much debt from the trip of a lifetime. I didn't smile. I just felt steady. This wasn't revenge. It was consequence. They thought they could touch my savings and laugh from the sand. They thought I'd panic, beg, forgive. Instead, I turned off the tap. And as the sun set over Riverton that night, I realized something quietly powerful. The moment you stop funding disrespect, everything changes. By the next morning, the story was no longer just mine. A coworker had overheard one of my calls the day before. She hadn't meant to spread it, but in a town like Riverton, things travel fast. By noon, my phone buzzed nonstop with messages from old classmates, neighbors, and distant relatives. Is it true your parents drained the account? You don't deserve this. I always wondered how they afforded all those trips. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was finally doing its own work. Mid-morning, my brother-in-law called. His voice was tight, angry, like someone trying to force control back into his hands. Lauren, you've gone too far, he said. You're humiliating our family. I leaned back in my office chair, staring at a spreadsheet of new client subscriptions rolling in. No, I said calmly. I stopped funding lies. He snapped that it was shared money, that I was ruining their image. Before I could reply, my sister grabbed the phone. Her voice was sharp, brittle. You're just jealous of our happiness. Admit it. I didn't raise my voice. I have proof, I said, that the money was taken without my consent. She went quiet. I sent them one screenshot, my mother's group chat message, laughing about using the house fund. There was a long pause. Then she muttered, "That's not how it looks." But her confidence was gone. That afternoon, my work pulled me back into focus. A bakery owner I'd demoed my software for weeks earlier called, gushing about how much time it was saving her staff. She signed a contract for 2 more locations on the spot. Another email followed, then another. Somehow, momentum had chosen its moment. That evening, my sister posted anyway. A photo of her on a Miami balcony, cocktail in hand, ocean glowing behind her. Caption: Family sticks together. The comments were mixed. Looks amazing! Didn't you use your sister's money for this? Hope the house is okay. I took screenshots. Every one. Sent them to my lawyer. She replied minutes later. They're handing us evidence. Later that night, my best friend Erin met me at a small diner on the edge of town. Neon lights buzzed overhead as I finally exhaled. They're trying to make me look like the villain, I said. Aaron leaned forward. Because they're scared. You stopped being quiet. Her words settled something in me. As we talked, my aunt called. She'd heard rumors and wanted clarity. I forwarded her the screenshots without commentary. The silence that followed told me enough. Back home, I worked late, not out of panic, but purpose. My startup dashboard glowed with new signups. Their beach photos were piling up likes, but also doubt. They still thought shame would bring me back in line. They didn't realize I'd already stepped beyond their reach. And once the community starts questioning a story, control becomes very hard to get back. By the next day, the whispers had turned into conversations I couldn't ignore. A local business owner stopped me outside my office with a coffee in hand. I heard what happened, she said gently. That couldn't have been easy. Her tone wasn't curious, it was supportive. That was new. Then my phone buzzed again. An email this time. A small local news blog wanted a comment. They'd heard about a young entrepreneur whose family diverted shared funds for personal use. They framed it carefully, but the implication was clear. The story was moving faster than my parents could contain. I didn't respond to the blog. I didn't need publicity, I needed precision. At work, the opposite of chaos was unfolding. A gym owner called, saying a friend had recommended my software after reading about my startup online. You seem like someone who doesn't fold under pressure, he said. That's who I want to work with. We set a meeting for the next week. Back on social media, my sister's silence finally broke. She posted a vague story about boundaries and family misunderstandings. Comments flooded in, some sympathetic, some skeptical. A former neighbor wrote, "Using someone else's savings isn't a misunderstanding." I saved it. Again. That afternoon, my aunt called back. Her voice was quieter this time, less certain. I spoke to your mother, she said. She couldn't explain the withdrawals. I didn't gloat. I didn't push. I just want the truth out there, I replied. The shift was subtle, but it was happening. People who had always admired my parents' polished image were starting to see cracks, and cracks make noise. Meanwhile, my lawyer called with an update. The emergency freeze request is moving quickly, she said, and the social media posts you sent strengthen the timeline. I hung up and stared at my office window, watching traffic flow below. Just days ago, I'd felt cornered small. Now, everything felt aligned. That evening, I opened my laptop at home and reviewed new contracts. Revenue was up again. Not dramatically, but steadily. The kind of growth that comes from trust, not hype. Another message from my father popped up. Short. Sharp. You've embarrassed us. I didn't reply. Because embarrassment was never my goal. Accountability was. And as I powered down my laptop that night, one truth settled firmly in my chest. When people lose control over your money, they reveal who they really are. I was done explaining myself. The next move would speak louder than any argument ever could. Monday morning arrived heavier than I expected. I walked into the Riverton courthouse beside my lawyer, a slim folder tucked under my arm, but we both knew the real weight was inside it. Screenshots, bank statements, text messages, truth. The courtroom smelled faintly of old wood and paper. Across the aisle, my parents sat stiffly. My mother avoided my eyes. My father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. My sister sat beside them, arms crossed, already bristling with resentment. No one smiled. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. My lawyer stood first. Her voice was calm, precise, the voice of someone who had done this before. Your Honor, my client, Lauren Brooks, contributed substantial personal funds to a joint account legally designated for property maintenance. Those funds were repeatedly diverted for personal travel without her consent. She handed over the documents. The judge flipped through them slowly. Withdrawals, dates, amounts. My lawyer continued. These charges correspond exactly with airline tickets, hotel reservations, and a beachfront rental in Miami, none of which were agreed upon. My father stood abruptly, unable to help himself. It was family money, he insisted. We had every right to use it. The judge looked up. Sir, please sit. You'll speak when addressed. My mother followed, softer but sharper. Lauren always agreed to help. She's overreacting now. My lawyer didn't miss a beat. She slid forward a printed screenshot. A group chat message, my mother's words, unmistakable. We'll use the house fund. She won't notice. The judge's eyes paused. Then my sister stood. This is ridiculous, she snapped, pointing at me. She's doing this because she's jealous. She's always hated seeing us happy. The gavel struck the desk. Sit down, now. The room fell into a tense hush. I felt every heartbeat, but I didn't shrink. When my lawyer nodded to me, I stood. My savings paid for that account, I said evenly. Years of work. I wasn't asked. I was mocked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The judge turned to my sister. Were you aware the funds were not approved for travel? She hesitated. Just long enough. My lawyer handed over the final piece. Screenshots of my sister's social media posts, captions boasting about Miami, with comments questioning the source of the money. The timeline was undeniable. After a brief recess, the judge returned, his tone firm. The evidence shows clear misuse of jointly held funds, he said. Effective immediately, the account will remain frozen pending full audit. My breath caught. He continued. Mr. and Mrs. Brooks are ordered to repay $7,000 to Miss Brooks within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in further action. The gavel fell. It was over. As we exited the courtroom, my father muttered something bitter under his breath. My mother grabbed my sister's arm, pulling her away. No one looked back. Outside, the air felt different, lighter. My lawyer squeezed my shoulder. You stood your ground. I nodded. I wasn't triumphant. I wasn't relieved. I was finished pretending. For the first time, the truth hadn't needed my silence to survive. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within a week, the image my parents had spent decades polishing began to crack in public. A neighbor texted me a photo of a for sale sign taped to my father's prized vintage car. Another message followed. My mother had quietly sold a diamond necklace she never took off. The repayment order had hit harder than they'd admitted in court. People noticed. At community gatherings, there were whispers instead of smiles. Invitations my parents once received without question stopped coming. Someone I barely knew told me, "It's awkward now. No one knows what to say to them." For the first time, they weren't controlling the narrative. My sister and her husband weren't safe from the fallout either. A client of mine casually mentioned that her firm had pulled out of a real estate deal with my brother-in-law. After that court situation, trust became an issue, she said, like it was nothing more than market logic. It wasn't. My sister's social media went quiet. The endless stream of beach photos, brunches, and inspirational quotes disappeared overnight. When she did resurface days later, it was with a vague post about toxic people and protecting your peace. The comments weren't kind. People were asking questions she didn't want to answer. Meanwhile, my world kept moving forward. A local paper ran a short feature about my startup, framing it as a story of persistence under pressure. They didn't sensationalize my family drama, but they didn't hide it either. Clients reached out, mentioning the article. One wrote, "Anyone who can stand up like that and still run a business, that's who I want to partner with." Revenue ticked up, then up again. I stayed late most nights, training new hires and refining systems. The office buzzed with purpose. My parents' chaos felt farther away every day. Then my aunt called. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "I shouldn't have taken your mother's word without asking." Later that night, I saw her post online, short, direct, owning her mistake. The comments shifted. Support tilted unmistakably in my direction. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt seen. My parents didn't reach out, not to apologize, not to explain. I wasn't surprised. I walked past their house one evening and noticed how empty it looked. The lawn untrimmed, the lights off. Something about it felt smaller than it used to. I didn't stop. I had learned something powerful through all of this. When people build their power on your silence and your money, they collapse the moment you remove both. And I wasn't looking back to check the damage anymore. I had somewhere better to go. The shift became impossible to ignore about a month later. I was finalizing a new contract at the office when one of my team members hesitated before speaking. "You didn't hear this from me," she said quietly, "but your parents missed a mortgage payment." I thanked her and turned back to my screen. My pulse stayed steady. I didn't feel satisfaction, just confirmation. Choices echo. Eventually, they come back, loud enough to hear. By then, my sister had completely vanished from social media. The curated perfection was gone, replaced by silence. A cousin later told me she'd been frantically calling relatives, trying to explain what happened. Most didn't answer. The story had already settled. One evening, a message finally came through. "You've ruined us!" It was from my sister. I stared at the words for a moment, then forwarded the screenshot to my lawyer. No reply. No defense. No apology from me was coming to save her from consequences she helped create. At work, momentum kept building. A regional fitness chain signed on after a demo, followed by 2 more locations within weeks. My calendar filled. Investors started asking about scalability. The same discipline that once paid for my parents' comfort was now building something sustainable, something mine. My lawyer called with an update. "The audit is confirming what we expected," she said. "There's no dodging it." I thanked her and hung up, feeling grounded in a truth I'd resisted for years. I wasn't responsible for saving people who refused to treat me with honesty. A few days later, my aunt stopped by the office with a tin of homemade cookies. We talked politely, carefully. She mentioned my mother wouldn't look at her at book club anymore. I just nodded. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. That evening, I signed another contract. The office lights burned a little longer, coffee cups stacked in the sink. My team laughed over takeout containers, celebrating a milestone that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Outside, the city moved as it always had, unaware of the quiet recalibration happening in my life. I drove home past my parents' street without slowing down. The house sat dark. A place that once demanded my sacrifice now reduced to background scenery. And in that moment, I understood something clearly for the first time. Success hits differently when it comes from standing your ground, not proving your worth. They had tried to keep me small by draining me dry. Instead, they'd given me the final push to walk away and build better. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. 2 years later, I stood under the bright lights of the Riverton Convention Center, listening to applause ripple through the room as our company logo lit up the screen behind me. Our newest app launch was live. Investors shook hands. Clients smiled. Reporters took notes. My team, tired, proud, unstoppable, stood in the front row. What had started as a scrappy startup built on sleepless nights was now powering businesses across the state. Revenue had tripled. We'd opened a second office downtown. For the first time in my life, everything I'd built felt secure. And my parents weren't there. I hadn't spoken to them since the court ruling. I'd blocked their numbers, filtered their emails, and chosen silence not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Peace, I learned, is sometimes just distance you stop apologizing for. I heard updates through others. They'd sold the rest of their valuables, moved into a smaller apartment. Their social circle had evaporated along with the image they once guarded so fiercely. At family gatherings, their names were mentioned less and less, until eventually, not at all. My sister tried once. A letter arrived at my office, handwritten. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she wrote. "Please forgive me." I read it once. Then I fed it into the shredder. Forgiveness isn't owed when accountability never comes. That night, my best friend Erin, now my business partner, joined me for a quiet drink after the launch. We talked about our next move, an AI feature, expansion, bigger goals. The future felt open instead of heavy. Driving home, I realized something profound. Losing my family's approval didn't destroy me. It clarified everything. I'd spent years confusing loyalty with obligation, love with endurance. I thought being the strong one meant taking whatever was handed to me and smiling through it. I was wrong. Strength wasn't staying. It was leaving when staying cost too much. If there's one thing this journey taught me, it's this. Protect your money, your time, your energy, and the people who treat them like they matter. Anyone who laughs while taking from you was never rooting for you in the first place. That chapter of my life closed quietly, and I didn't look back. Because what I built afterward was louder than any apology I never received.